What did Absalom do to his brother Amnon? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 23 to 33. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 23. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 13, beginning at verse 23. And it came to pass after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Then Absalom came to the king and said, "Kindly note, your servant has sheep shearers. Please let the king and his servants go with your servant." But the king said to Absalom, "No, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be a burden to you." Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us." And the king said to him, "Why should he go with you?" But Absalom urged him, so he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, "Watch now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, 'Strike Amnon,' then kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant." So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled. And it came to pass, when they were on the way, that news came to David, saying, "Absalom has killed all the king's sons, and not one of them is left." So the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. Then Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, answered and said, "Let not my lord suppose that they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Now therefore let not my lord the king take this thing to heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for only Amnon is dead." Just a quick warning to parents with young children that we will do a quick review of the beginning of this chapter. So if your children are not mature enough yet for that discussion, we invite you to skip ahead about a minute to the next portion of this video, which, if you're watching on YouTube, will be the next chapter on the time progress bar. In this chapter, we have been taking a look at the immorality of Amnon in committing incest with his sister by raping her. We noted that Amnon believed that he was in love with her, when all he really was in lust with her. Tamar was innocent in the affair, telling Amnon that she did not want to have sex with him, but he was stronger than she, and so he forced himself upon her and raped her. The encounter, though, wasn't what he expected, and afterwards his hate towards her was stronger than his love for her ever was. He sent her away, which in that culture would make it seem as if Tamar had seduced Amnon, making Tamar out to be a whore. When David heard about it, he was very angry with the situation, but seemingly did nothing to punish Amnon, who was deserving of death, likely due to the fact that David was also worthy of death, due to his adultery with Bathsheba, yet was not punished with that. How then could David treat Amnon differently, especially since Amnon would have known about his affair with Bathsheba? For Absalom, though, Tamar was his full sister by his mother Maacah, while Amnon was only his half-brother. Therefore, to defend his sister's honor was a feeling that ran strong in Absalom. But unlike some who would take swift action, Absalom was patient. Had he acted too quickly, he might not have succeeded in killing Amnon, but instead end up condemning himself to death without any punishment for Amnon to be had. No, he waited 2 whole years to enact his revenge, thus allowing for David to think that Absalom's anger must have subsided. It is quite possible, then, that we're 4 to 5 years removed from David's adultery with Bathsheba. It is sheep-shearing time in Israel, which puts us in the spring. Amnon had an estate in Baal Hazor, which is said to just be within the borders of Ephraim, believed to be about located 26 kilometers or 16 miles north and east of Jerusalem. Absalom wanted his father to accompany him up to his land, but the king refused, thinking that it would be too much of a burden for Absalom to host a king. This shows us how much of a court how much the court of David has grown from the days of Saul, when a visit from the king, his own father, might be too much for Absalom to be able to do. Since David could not go, Absalom asked if Amnon could go. When David asked why, Absalom simply insisted, and David acquiesced, not only sending Amnon, but also his sons. If this number also included Solomon, then more than 4 to 5 years have passed since David sinned with Bathsheba. That David allowed Amnon to go with Absalom, knowing what Amnon did to Tamar, does tell us that David didn't think Absalom was still angry with Amnon, but had to let the matter go. However, we know that Absalom had not let the matter go, but was using this as an opportunity to get Amnon away from the protection of the palace and its guards in order that he might be killed. And so Absalom got Amnon drunk so as to delay his ability to react, and ordered his servants to kill Amnon. And they were successful, for Amnon died, punishment for Amnon's violation of Tamar. Now, we must note that what Absalom did here was murder. He was not the king who could bring about justice. Amnon hadn't killed Tamar, and so Absalom couldn't even be claimed to be the avenger of blood. This was vigilante justice, which is in fact murder. By killing Amnon, no matter if we or Absalom believe Amnon deserved it, Absalom made himself guilty of a capital crime, and thus himself was worthy of death. As Christians, sometimes someone does something to us and others, and then escapes justice by our society. In that case, we may not seek personal vengeance, but allow God to punish in God's time. As painful as that would be for Absalom and Tamar, Absalom was not justified in his actions here. Continuing on, the other sons of David did not understand what Absalom was doing, and so fearing that Absalom would take their lives too in order to secure his ascension to David's throne, they fled for their lives on mules. However, word preceded their escape and came to David that Absalom had killed all of David's sons. David immediately tore his clothes in anguish and fell to the floor. Had God's prophecy about the sword not departing from David's house come true in such a brutal fashion that David lost all of his sons? Well, Jonadab, the same man who advised Amnon 2 years earlier how to lure Tamar to himself, spoke up and said that it would be wrong to conclude that all his sons were dead, for Absalom wouldn't have killed all of them, only Amnon, who had raped Tamar. Jonadab wasn't speaking from actual knowledge of the situation, but his knowledge of Absalom. He had obviously been watching Absalom these past 2 years and knew what his actions could have been. Absalom did not hate his other brothers, just Amnon, and so if he killed anyone, it would be Amnon, and Amnon alone. In the end, we know this is true, for only Amnon died. What will happen to Absalom? We'll find out, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 13, verses 34 to 39, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.